So today we are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 24, text number 71. Yogadesham upasadya dharayanto munivrata samahita dhiya sarva etad abhyasata drita. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. My dear princess, in the form of a prayer, I have delineated the yoga system of chanting the holy name. All of you should take this important stotra within your minds and promise to keep it in order to become great sages. By acting silently like a great sage and by giving attention and reverence, you should practice this method. Purport. In the Hatha Yoga system, one has to practice bodily exercises, dhyana, dharana, asana, meditation, etc. One also has to sit in one place in a particular posture and concentrate his gaze on the tip of the nose. There are so many rules and regulations for the Hatha Yoga system that it is practically impossible to perform it in this age. The alternative system of Bhakti Yoga is very easy, not only in this age but in others as well. For this yoga system was advocated long ago by Lord Shiva when he advised the princes, the sons of Maharaj Prachina Parishat. The Bhakti Yoga system is not newly introduced. For even 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna recommended this Bhakti Yoga as the topmost yoga. As Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 6.47, Yoginam api sarvesham madgata antaratmanaha shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. Of all the yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. The topmost yogi is he who constantly thinks of Krishna within himself and chants the glories of the Lord. In other words, this system of Bhakti Yoga has been existing from time immemorial and is now continuing in this Krishna conscious movement. The word Muni Vrata is significant in this regard because those who are interested in advancing in spiritual life must be silent. Silence means talking only of Krishna Katha. This is the silence of Maharaj Ambarish. Savai mana Krishna padara vindayo vachamsi vaikunta gunanuvarnane. King Ambarish always fixed his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord and talked of him only. Srimad Bhagavatam 9.4.19. We should also take this opportunity in life to become as good as a great saint simply by not talking unnecessarily with unwanted persons. We should either talk of Krishna or chant Hare Krishna undeviatingly. This is called Muni Vrata. The intelligence must be very sharp, samahita dhiyaha, and should always be acting in Krishna consciousness. The words etad abhyasata dhritaha indicate that if one takes these instructions from a spiritual master with great reverence, ardhrita, and practices them accordingly, he will find this bhakti yoga process to be very, very easy. Wonderful. So I'll repeat the translation of the sloka here again. It says, my dear princess, in the form of a prayer, I have delineated the yoga system of chanting the holy name. All of you should take this important stotra within your mind and promise to keep it in order to become great sages. By acting silently like a great sage and by giving attention and reverence, you should practice this method. I thought this is very beautiful line where it says that all of you should take this important stotra within your mind and promise to keep it in order to become great sages. See, it's very easy to come into Krishna consciousness, but I think what is difficult is to stay in Krishna consciousness. So here also when Lord Shiva, he gives this important stotra to the Prachetas, he says, I'm giving you this, keep it within your mind, and he said, promise to keep it in. So I thought, I guess everybody has this problem, that they get it, but then to keep it is a big challenge. Like Prabhupada said, it's easy to come into Krishna consciousness, but the challenge is that how long you can stay, right? Like I remember one of the Prabhupada disciples was coming and complaining to Prabhupada that so many are leaving Krishna consciousness. So he said, don't worry about who are leaving. Come and tell me who are staying, because that's a big challenge. So sometimes it's easy to get into the Krishna consciousness, but what is difficult is to constantly stay, because that requires constant endeavor. See, you may get into Krishna consciousness because you got mercy of Guru and Krishna. There is a Guru Krishna Kripa Te Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. So maybe by mercy of a Vaishnava, by mercy of a Guru, you may come into Krishna consciousness. But then staying in Krishna consciousness is your endeavor. You need to work hard on that. Like sometimes you see, even in the wilderness, it's dark, it's thunder. Let's say somebody is in a forest. Then he works very hard. He gets some twigs, some wood, and he just makes a fire by rubbing two stones, and somehow he ignites fire. Definitely it's difficult, not easy. But now what the bigger challenge is, once the fire is light, now he has a source of heat and light. But now the bigger challenge is that he needs to make sure that it keeps going. And for that he needs to constantly work hard. So now it's not that once the fire is ignited, he will take a nap. Now he has to constantly keep working, right? That means what he has to do, he'll climb on this tree, that tree, try to get some twigs, collect something, put it again in the fire to make sure that the fire goes on. So that's how Krishna conscious process is also. You will somehow get in, but then to constantly stay is a challenge. So actually the whole process begins after you get in. Like many a times, all of us have a thinking that what was difficult was to give up the old bad habits and come to the point of initiation. And now I've already done, I've taken initiation, but the actual challenge starts from there. Once you take initiation, now how will you maintain your vow, and how can you constantly be there and go up? Because there is, again, it's not even about constantly staying there. You need to go up. This is something like a treadmill. Once you are on a treadmill, you can't stop. You need to keep walking, otherwise you will fall down. So same thing happens in Krishna consciousness. Nobody can say that, I'm fine, I'm here and I've been here and I plan to stay on this stage for some time. No, it doesn't happen like that. Either you fall or you go up. There's nothing like staying. That means every single day you need to become a better devotee. You understand? So it's like, suppose you say, no, I'm okay, I may not be progressing, but no, it's not like that. Either you're progressing or you're going down. So that means if you're not progressing, then because it says before you fall, you slip, right? So we have to be so careful. That means every day there has to be a progress in our Krishna conscious life. So I thought this is really beautiful where he says that, like, you see, the whole background of this sloka is how the Prachetas are advised by their father to create, that means to reproduce, get offspring. So then they say, fine, we'll go and do some austerity, do some tapasya, so that we get strength and we produce good progeny. So this is also a very important point. I wouldn't want to touch on this point today, but how in those days, or I can say how devotees, for everything they take blessings of the Lord and they want Lord's intervention, even if it may be so-called outrightly materialistic activity, something like producing children, but still they always want Lord's blessing. So then they go ahead for first purification, so that the progeny which comes out is a good one. So then they go ahead, all 10 of them, to go for tapasya, and then on the way they meet Lord Shiva, who's coming out of a water reservoir with his associates, and then Lord Shiva very mercifully guides them, and then he gives them this beautiful stuti, what they're supposed to do. So of course we see in Srimad Bhagavatam, this is how the theme is every time, whether it's Prahlad or it's Dhruva. The theme is that initial they have a desire and then Krishna sends them a guru, right? So like we make a desire and then Krishna will make all arrangements. Like we see in case of Dhruva Maharaj also. He had a desire and then Narad Muni comes in his life. So similarly here we say the Prachetas have a desire and then Krishna sends Guru or Shiva comes and then he guides them what they're supposed to do. And then the whole stuti starts very beautifully, where Lord Shiva explains about the beautiful form of the Lord and the qualities of the Lord. And then this sloka which we are doing today is like a culmination, wherein Lord Shiva is saying that, look, I've given you the prayer now, and now what you're supposed to do is that keep this prayer in your mind and keep it in. He makes sure to keep it in, and that will make you great sages. And then he gives one very beautiful instruction. He says that by acting silently like a great sage. So, one of the qualities, like, remember when I was giving this 26 qualities of a Vaishnava, and I was explaining how one of the quality of Vaishnava is that he's Mauni. So he doesn't talk. So Mauni doesn't mean that he has a silence or vrata of a silence, but what it actually means is he doesn't talk anything but about Krishna. He doesn't waste his time in talking about. And then we see a similar sloka in Bhagavad Gita also, where it is told about what are the symptoms of a devotee. So bodhayasta parasparam. He's always talking about me. He's always thinking about me and talking about me. So then this is one point here. He says that by acting silently like a great sage and by giving attention and reverence, you should practice this method. So I said, I'm sorry, I think somebody needs to mute their audio. All right. So here he says that by acting silently like a great sage and by giving attention and reverence, you should practice this method. So not only has Lord Shiva given this method, but he also gives the do's and don'ts, just like a doctor. A doctor gives the medicine, and then he gives the diet, and he gives do's and don'ts. So here Lord Shiva gives the stuti, what they're supposed to chant, where their mind should be, what they're supposed to store in the mind, and then he gives the don'ts. The don'ts are, he says that they should be silent. That means don't waste your time or don't mix with people. Like you see, Prabhupada here says the word Munivrata is very significant because those who are interested in advancing in spiritual life must be silent. That's very important. So then again Prabhupada clarifies, silence means what? Talking only about Krishna Katha. So then he says, just like Maharaj Ambrish, he was using all his limbs in serving Krishna, whether it was his mind or eyes or nose or ears, every part of his body, every limb he was using in Krishna's service. So silence means talking only about Krishna. And I thought that is a very beautiful point which we can ponder upon, silence. Because I think that is one which is very challenging, I guess, especially in this yuga. Everybody wants to talk. And especially now I see during this lockdown, there's so many people out there making videos, going Facebook Live, Zoom Live. I'm very happy as long as it is devotees who are doing it. But then I've seen the people, all sorts of people who coming live and talking about coronavirus. Whatever information they have, look, wash your hand, look, do this, do that. The thing is, everybody likes to talk. But what you are talking is very important. So Prabhupada said that if you talk, then you talk about Krishna. So that is the silence which devotees maintain. They talk only about Krishna, right? But I guess this is our habit. Either we are talking about something in the past, or we are thinking something about future. This is what will happen, or we're just trying to prove ourselves, right? It's so difficult. If you ask somebody to be silent, it's very difficult. Sometimes devotees will come and say, I stick to Krishna Katha, or I like to talk about Krishna, but then this person come and said this, so I had to tell him this is not correct, or this is not, that kind of conversations. And then half of our time is eaten up by proving to people, I have not done this, or this is the right thing, right? Most of the time it is just, sometimes just sit and think about our conversations, what they are made up of. It's either, I'm not talking about, see those who are serious devotees, they will be talking nothing but glorifying Krishna or something in connection of service. But if you just see a normal conversation, how does it go? What you did, what I did, what I ate, what you ate, and how I'm great, and how, that's how it goes, trying to prove ourselves. And especially when somebody says something, we want to prove that we are not wrong, our justification. So much time is eaten up in all those things. One other day I was hearing one very beautiful class, and one devotee was making a very beautiful point. He said that, do you want to prove yourself, or you want to improve yourself? So before you open your mouth, just check out, you want to prove yourself, or you want to improve yourselves. So it's not always that we need to answer back, or clarify or justify our position. Sometimes we can just remain silent. I'm reminded of this story of a Zen guru I'd heard about in my college time. This was this one guru who was living on the outskirts of a village, and he was a Mauni, silent. He doesn't talk anything. And it so happened that in that village, it was a very conservative village, and a young girl was pregnant. So everybody was asking, who's your boyfriend and how this thing happened. Now she was very much worried, if I tell the name of my boyfriend, everybody will go and beat him up, because this is not the Indian culture. So she was very much afraid. So out of her fear, she just said, oh, it's that Zen guru, who lives in the outskirts of our village. So everybody goes there and they beat him up, and he doesn't even know why are they beating him. So, they tell him, you did this, you did that, and he's simply hearing. And then afterward, this girl, she gives birth to the baby. So once she gives birth to the baby, they take this baby and they go and hand it over to this Zen guru and say that you have to take care of this baby because it's your baby. So he's a Mauni, but he just simply says two words. He says, is it? Oh, is it? I have to take care. Oh, is it? I said, yes. So he takes care. Now he is a sadhu. He doesn't know what to do, but somehow he manages. And then this girl, she's been looking at that sadhu from far off, and she's feeling very bad that, I'm putting this saintly person in a problem. So finally she decides that I'll just open up. Whatever is the truth, I'll tell. So she just tells her parents, no, this is not the truth, and he hasn't done anything, and this is my friend. So then they all again go to the sadhu and they touch his feet and they say, sorry, you are not the one, and we are very sorry to have put you in inconvenience. It's not you, it's this guy. And then again he just says these two words. He says, is it? Well, that's about it. And then they just take the baby back. The wonderful thing is that when he was blamed, he had the same reaction, oh, is it? And when he was, glorified that it's not you and we are sorry, he has the same reaction, oh, is it? That's about it. There was no clarification, or there was no sulking, or there was no big thing like, Arey, but you blamed me. See, you saw how I am, such a nice person, and see what you told, and see how you blame. There's just nothing. Oh, is it? Because he's so busy in some other business that he doesn't even consider this important to clarify to these people what he is or what he is not. Of course, having given this example, I'm not trying to say that we should come off to that stage where people come and blame us, and then, something like Gandhi said, you slap me here and I give you my. What I'm trying to say is that this is how the saintly people are. I'm just trying to draw a point that, why do they do that? Because of their higher connection. They are so strongly connected to the Lord that other things are immaterial. They don't even think it's important to clarify. It is something like, I many times give this example that if somebody is very rich, then for him small things don't matter. When somebody is very strongly connected to the Lord, then what the other person thinks about him or doesn't think, or thinks great or thinks bad, is not important anymore, because he's so highly connected. So of course that's our aim, and so that on a scale of 10, that may be 10, and we may be somewhere here 1 or 2, but we know this is how the devotees or the saintly people are. They're so strongly connected to Krishna that nothing of this material world make any difference to them. So the silent in the real sense is they talk about Krishna, they think about Krishna. Now coming back to this point about the mind, mana, this is the most important thing in Krishna consciousness. Like you see in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying, Srila Prabhupada is quoting this sloka, Yoginam api sarvesham. So it says in Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says that of all the yogis, the one who is thinking about me, worshipping me. In fact, the same point he draws in 9th chapter also, when he says man mana bhava mad bhakto. And then the same sloka he repeats in the 18th chapter also. So definitely it's very important, otherwise it's going on repeating this one thing, that you remember me, worship me, become my devotee. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is talking about how this Hatha Yoga and all is so difficult because, dhyana and asana, and you have to meditate on the tip of your nose. But Bhakti Yoga, the alternative way, is very simple, just serve the Lord. In fact, if you see in the Bhagavad Gita also, all these different yogas that Krishna is talking about, whether it's Gnana, Karma, Dhyana, basically they are all part of Bhakti Yoga. What is mean by Gnana Yoga? Gnana Yoga means that you know more about Krishna, Gnana about Krishna. What is Dhyana Yoga is you remember about Krishna, whereas Karma Yoga is you serve Krishna. So basically everything is pointing towards the Bhakti Yoga. And then Prabhupada talks about how it's difficult to do Hatha Yoga and it's more practical and more easy to go for Bhakti Yoga. Just remember Krishna. Now, remembering Krishna means having your mind focus on Krishna. Now, many of the times as devotees, we feel this is very big challenge. We are trying to remember Krishna, but we are remembering so many other things that it's becoming difficult to remember Krishna. That means we need to make our activities and life in such a way that we are saturated with Krishna consciousness and there is no place for Maya. Like I remember when we were in school, we had this science experiment, where you take a beaker and then you put some water in it and then you put some salt and the teacher mixes it and then she puts some more salt and she puts some more salt. So the salt keeps dissolving, but then at some point the salt doesn't dissolve anymore. That's a saturation point. So I'm thinking in our Krishna conscious life, it's the same thing. If we put so much Krishna consciousness into our life and we are saturated with it, then I guess there will be no place for Maya. But I guess in our life, it's a little other way around. We are so saturated with Maya that there's no place for Krishna consciousness anymore because we are so up to the brim with Maya and with our materialistic activities that there is no place for Krishna in our life. So the tagline of our organization, always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So this is what we have to do, but because we are so saturated with other activities. And if we are saturated with the other activities to the brim, then it will be very difficult to accommodate remembrance of Krishna. See, I remember this one story about this sadhu who was very famous and he had lots of disciples. So one day a very rich man walks into his sermon, to his lectures. And then at the end, he comes and pays obeisances and he says, Sadhuji, I'm in a problem. Can you help me? So he says, what help you require? So he said, well, I'm a big businessman. And because of this coronavirus lockdown, my factory is closed and I have no money. So can you help me somewhere? So he said, what is your business? So he says, well, I produce oil. So he said, fine, you produce oil. In the sense, that means you must be having those big iron barrels where you store oil, you filter them and the whole process goes on. He says, yes. The sadhu says, very simple, I have a touchstone with me. So you go ahead, take this touchstone and the moment this touchstone touches the iron, they will be turned into gold. And your financial problem will be sorted out. So he was very happy. So he took the stone and he was very happy. He went home. And then he never came back. So the sadhu is waiting, this Sunday feast is over, the next Sunday feast is over, but he's not coming back. And after 6 months, the sadhu decided that I'll go and pay a visit to him. So the sadhu goes and meets him. Now he's still in a very, miserable situation and, very sad. And when the sadhu walks in, he's not very respectful. So sadhu says, well, what exactly happened? I gave you the touchstone. So he said, yeah, I just lost faith on you. So he said, what did I do wrong? The sadhu asked. He said, you said that was a touchstone, but it didn't change nothing into gold. My all iron barrels are still iron barrels. Nothing changed. The sadhu said, well, I gave you a genuine touchstone. And he said, well, if it is true, then why nothing changed into gold? Then he said, come on, can you show me where is that stone? Let me check. So he said, it's not with me, it's in my factory. So they all go to the place where this oil production happens. So sadhu says, where is the stone? So he said that these iron barrels are very huge, very high and deep. So he said, I took a ladder and I threw the touchstone inside one of the barrels so that it turns into gold. So then sadhu says, which barrel? So then they just climb up the ladder together and then they peep inside. And what the sadhu sees, this particular touchstone had never touched the iron. Why? Because of the lockdown, there was lots of cobwebs inside the iron barrel. So when he actually threw the stone was on the cobweb and it was hanging. It never touched the iron. So that's why it never turned into gold. So then the sadhu says, look here, the touchstone hasn't even touched the iron and that's why it didn't touch into gold. And then he understands, and then finally they have a solution. Now, why I gave this example is that I guess we also got something like a touchstone, like this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and sometimes we say, how come it just doesn't work? I mean, I've been chanting 10 years, 16 years, I know how come my problems are not sorted out, or how come this or that, but probably there are so many cobwebs in our mind that it's not even touching us, right? We're not even doing it mindfully, we're very mechanical about it. So, I mean, see, everywhere you see in the whole process of Krishna consciousness, the importance is given to the mind. Your mind has to be with Krishna. Krishna says, I want your mind, man mana bhava mad bhakto. So we have to give our mind to Krishna, right? But our mind is full of cobwebs. Our mind is full of materialistic things. So the Mahamantra doesn't touch our heart. Many times I've given this example that in our lives, it's not only about parigraha, accumulating of physical things, but we also make a lot of accumulation of things in our mind. The experiences that we have with people around, we accumulate them in our mind. We don't forget and forgive and move on. So as a result, our mind is so full of so many cobwebs, We need to close our accounts with people in this lifetime. We shouldn't be carrying things. We shouldn't become judgmental. We shouldn't have preconceived notions about people. These are the cobwebs of our mind. We have so many things in our mind that we're not able to give space for Krishna in this, right? So, what does our mind do? Either we have two Shaktis. One is Darshan Shakti and one is Smaran Shakti. Smaran Shakti is because of which we are able to remember our past, and Darshan Shakti is with which we see the present. Now, what our mind usually keeps doing is either it's thinking about the past or it's making plan about the future, but it's never in the present. And because it's not there in the present, and because it's not under our control, we are not able to direct it towards Krishna, because it's always somewhere else. Nothing wrong in thinking about the past, as long as it helps our present. But that should be also in a very minute quantity. Something like when we drive car, we have a rear mirror in the car with which we see what's going on behind when we are driving. But how much do we see in that mirror? Maybe just for a couple of seconds. But we don't drive the car by looking into the rear mirror. We look front and we keep looking it off and on to see what's happening behind. So that is how our life should be. We look in the past, but we don't keep looking in the past, right? We look forward. And if we can stay in present, then we can put our mind into Krishna. See, everybody says this, it's a challenge to remember Krishna. So go deep and just find out, why is it a challenge to remember Krishna? Because where is your mind? Your mind is either thinking about past or your mind is thinking about future, and that is why you're not able to. Because if your mind was in present, then you can put into, thinking of Krishna. So this is one thing we need to avoid, is to constantly not keep thinking about the past. Not, of course, this example you must have heard many a times, that I want to repeat here in this context how this story I had heard about. I think Radha Govind Maharaj was telling the story that how there was these two brahmacharis who were walking on their way to the ashram, and then they find a pregnant lady who's drowning inside the river, and she's asking for help. And then out of these two brahmachari, one brahmachari goes, he also dives in the water, and somehow he saves this lady, and he just carries the lady on his back and brings her to the bank, and somehow saves her, and she's very happy, and she thanks him. And both of these brahmacharis, they walk back to the ashram. So in the night when they were about to sleep, the elder brahmachari asked the younger brahmachari that, how come you did that? As a brahmachari in a saffron cloth, you're not supposed to touch women. So then this man says that, but I understand that there are certain rules, but when there is somebody's life needs to be saved, then certain rules can be given up for higher purpose. So then he says, no, but I don't think it's correct what you did. And he goes on. And then this brahmachari tells him that, look, I just carried the lady from the river to the bank, but I guess you carried her all the way to the ashram. You're still carrying her in your mind. So sometimes it is about, what are we carrying in our mind? Sometimes we're carrying so many unnecessary things in our mind, which makes it so much, saturated that then there is no place for Krishna. So we have to be careful, what we are carrying in our mind. It's already 5:30, so maybe I will directly try to conclude the class by giving some tips on how to control your mind or how to engage mind into Krishna consciousness. So one tip that came in my mind today morning is when I was hearing the story by Prabhupada. In one of his classes, he was telling this very humorous story about how there was this one man who wanted to have an elaborate Durga Puja. And we all know in West Bengal, Durga Puja or Devi Puja is that they slaughter goats. So this Brahmin, he goes and with his hard-earned money, goes to the market and he gets a small goat, baby goat. And then on his way back from the market, there was a group of thieves who wanted to somehow take the goat away from him. So they plan it up, how to go about it. So what they do is they place themselves on different places. So from her market to the house, when he is walking, on different places these thieves are standing. So in a very friendly way they ask him, so first thief, he meets him and he says, how come you are carrying a dog? Devi Puja means you're supposed to give a goat, you're supposed to slaughter a goat. And then he says, are you mad or something? I'm not carrying dog. Because he was very lovingly carrying the goat on his shoulders. And he says, I'm not carrying a dog, I'm carrying a goat. It looks like you're out of your mind. And then he just ignores whatever he says and then he goes further. And the second thief is standing there and he again repeats the same thing. He says, how come you're carrying a dog? Being a Brahmin, you're touching a dog. And then he again clarifies, are you out of your mind? This is not a dog, this is a goat. And because the second time a person has told him, so he actually, removes the goat from his shoulder and he just checks the ears and, yeah, this is a goat, I don't think I've got myself wrong, And then the third thief is standing, somewhere. And then when third thief, he again tells him, how come you're carrying a goat? And this time he thinks that, how come three people say the same thing? Maybe it's actually dog. Maybe I'm not able to see. Looks like I'm spaced out, some problem with me. So finally he thinks that if I actually go with this and if it actually comes out to be a dog, then I'll be embarrassed. What the village people will think, they may laugh on me. So finally he just throws the goat there and he just runs away. And then these thieves, they get the goat and then they slaughter it and have a feast. So Prabhupada tells this example to make a point that even if a lie is repeated 3 times, it becomes truth. But what we are preaching is true, it's what we are preaching is the truth. So why not we repeat it, so that it goes into people's mind. So I was thinking that how do we control our mind, the theme of this sloka is Yoginam api sarvesam. Krishna likes, or the best of the yogi is one who can connect his mind to Krishna. And how do we practically in our day-to-day life try and connect our mind to Krishna? I thought one way is repetition. We keep hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, scriptures, classes, hearing, reading, keep repeating, reminding ourselves that this is our goal, to go back to Krishna, and that helps if we keep on repeating it. The second thing I thought was engaging. Like this was one example given by Prabhupada, in the olden days in the villages, because there are no bathrooms, no restrooms. They take some water in a pot and then they go to the wild, into the forest for the nature's call. So there was this one villager who used to regularly go to a particular place for his nature's call. And then after he's done with it, always there was some water left over in his pot. So why to carry the water back to home? So he used to simply pour that water on, the roots of a tree. After a couple of days, what he saw is a Rakshasa comes out of the tree, a Brahma Rakshasa, and he says, I've been thirsty for ages, and you've been giving me water every day, so I'm very thankful to you. So I want to do something for you. So what can I do for you? So he says, well, I don't know. No, you have to say something, otherwise I'll eat you up. Well, that's my rule. You have to give me some work, otherwise I'll eat you up. So he says, fine, make a house for me. But this guy, this Brahma Rakshasa is like a genie. He's so quick in doing things. So he just makes a house in a fraction of a second. He says, what next? You have to give me something, otherwise I'll eat you. Then he says, all right, give me a car, give me this. And then what next? And then what next? Otherwise I'll eat you up. So this man is like, what do I do? I'm in a big mess. Otherwise he's going to eat me up. So then he gets an idea. He's a Bengali fellow, smart guy. So he says, all right, dig some mud, put a bamboo stick there. Now you go up on the bamboo stick and then you come down, and then you go up, and then you come down, and you keep doing it until I tell you, until I ask you to stop. So this man keeps going up and down, and he's saved. So I was thinking that the same problem is with our mind. It's like a monkey. It's always jumping here and there. So we need to also keep our mind engaged, how are we engaging our mind presently? We also tell our mind like that Brahma Rakshasa, you start with this first bead and it goes up to the 108th bead, and then you again come back to the first bead, and then you again go up to the 108th bead, and you keep going up and down until we ask you to stop. So if we keep our mind engaged either in chanting or hearing, then it will not give us trouble. Because the moment the mind is idle, it's going to make problem, right? You see what's happening. I was hearing the news the other day. They said that people are afraid of this coronavirus, and because of that they have this lockdown. It's understandable, but some of them were giving their opinions that more than people dying of virus, they may die of depression, and there were abuses, and there were fightings, and because idle mind, so they have nothing to do. So what is happening in the houses, husband and wife fighting with each other, because mind is not engaged. Because otherwise, they were busy. The wife was busy with her work, and the husband is busy with his job. But now, because they are free, so you see so many problems. So mind is like a monkey. Unless you give it some job to do, it's going to give trouble. So first thing is I said is about repetition. You keep repeating to yourself what you have to do. About Krishna, and the second thing is engaging your mind. The third thing is praying. You pray sincerely, because certain things are possible only by prayer. Because when Arjuna himself says, Chanchala hi mana Krishna, Krishna, it's so difficult to control the mind. So who are you and me, right? That means it's only by mercy of Krishna that we can do something. So we pray to Krishna, that Krishna, please help me to control my mind, or please engage my mind in your service, because my mind is going here and there. Please help me. And somebody may ask, but Mataji, we've been praying, but doesn't look like our prayers are getting answered. But like Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, he very famously said, he gave this abbreviation. He said, PUSH, PUSH, pray until something happens. That means keep praying, keep praying, keep praying. And one fine day, Krishna is going to listen to your prayer and help you to engage your mind in Krishna's service. So keep praying. And the advantages, when we keep praying to Krishna, then he also has an obligation towards us. Like if you remember in the Sunday class, I was telling this story about Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj, remember? Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj was from a fisherman family, right? He was a son of a fisherman. He's a very, very pure devotee. Now what happens in his life, a very small incident in his life, one day he was just worshipping his Gaur-Nitai deities. Now he's very meticulous when he's worshipping, everything he does so perfectly, even when he cooks for the deities. each and every vegetable. He'll hold it in the hand, clean it, cut it. And while he's doing that, he'll talk to the deities, and it's perfect. So one day he was, this is his kutia, the place where he stays on the bank, and he's sitting outside there. And then there was one lady who comes with, see, he was in Navadvip, and Bengal means it's a place of, fishes. People eat fish. So this lady, she came to sell some fish. So when Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj immediately said, no, I don't eat. But she just put her basket down, with all varieties of fishes. Now a thought came in his mind for a fraction of a second, because he's a fisherman's son and he's an expertise on those, what varieties. So immediately a thought comes in his mind that good variety, good ones for eating. But then immediately he stops himself and this lady goes back. Now he gets so upset, that how come I got this thought? So he goes inside his kutia, inside this place where he stays, and he has his deities. He takes his deities, God and Nitai, and he ties them with a rope, and he puts them inside the river, and the other part of the rope he holds in his hand, and he shouts and, he chastises God Nitai and tells them that I've been worshipping you with so much love and affection. Can't you protect me? How dare did I get such kind of a thoughts? What's the use of praying to you? I've been praying so sincerely. I've been serving so sincerely. How dare you bring such thought into my mind? Are you going to do this again? Tell me. Otherwise, I'm not going to remove you from this pond. So imagine the deities are inside the pond. He's tied them with a rope, and one side of the rope is holding and saying, are you going to do this again? Tell me. Are you going to do this again? How dare did you bring that thought in my mind? Are you not supposed to protect me? And I thought that was so beautiful. The devotees like him are on such a stage. They have purchased Krishna. They have worshipped Krishna so sincerely. They have worshipped Krishna so sincerely that Krishna is obligated to protect them. Of course, we are not on that stage, and my giving this example is no way that, that we also go and tell the deities, how dare this thought came in my mind, why didn't you protect? But yeah, we can do it in a little humbler tone. My dear Lord, I am also praying you regularly, and I'm doing my sadhana, and I'm following the 4 rules and regulations, and I'm chanting my rounds, and please protect me, and please protect my mind that it doesn't go here and there. We can very humbly pray to the Lord. So one is repeating continuously, one is engaging your mind, one is praying. The other thing is to keep some goal. Sometimes we feel, oh, it's so big, these things like going back to Goloka Vrindavan or becoming a pure devotee. Oh my God, these are so high goals. Maybe I can never achieve them. It's not like that. We need to keep some aim, like from our place, at our pace, place from our place, wherever we are in Krishna consciousness. You may be a 4-rounder, you may be a 2-rounder, 8-rounder, wherever you are, from your place, at your pace. Whatever you can. Maybe somebody can dedicate their complete life in Krishna consciousness. Somebody can't. At your pace, whatever you can do, there should be some goal. There should be some goal. Okay, after 5 years, this is where I see myself. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to see myself. Okay, if I'm an 8-rounder now, I want to become a 16-rounder, or I want to do this service. There should be some aim. If there is no aim, it's very difficult. Like it's rightly said, if you are aimless, then you become shameless. You become shameless because there is no aim. See, imagine if somebody is driving a car and he doesn't have any location in particular to go. Then what happens? Whether he takes a right turn or a left turn, no turn is a wrong turn. Every turn is a right turn because there is no particular aim. See, what happens to students? When they are on a vacation, they're not guilty about, wasting their time and watching YouTube videos and all. But then if they have preparation holidays, then they're very particular. They don't want to waste their time because, oh my God, I just have 5 more days and I need to prepare for my exam. So they'll be so careful. But if they're on vacation, then they're not guilty. So similarly, if we have no goal, let's say in life, okay, I'll do it. I'm chanting already and karenge, I'm doing it, then you can't go ahead. But if you have an aim, no, by the end of this year or 2022, This is where I see myself, and I'm going to work in that direction. Then you will have that guilt. I can't waste my time. I just have this much time and I have to utilize it. So that is one tip of, getting our mind to be focused is when you show something, right? See, even for children, if you want children to walk towards you, you just need to show something. So we need to show our mind also some kind of a goal, and then our mind walks towards it, right? The other important point was about be very careful in finding out what is that which deviates us from Krishna consciousness, right? And what is that stimulus which keeps us in Krishna consciousness? I guess for that you don't need any external prescription. Everybody knows what motivates them and what demotivates them. Like for example, let's say for some people, hearing Krishna Katha is very motivating. If they hear Krishna Katha, they just become so spirited in Krishna consciousness. For some people, if they do bhajans, they have become so motivated. They love attending Kirtan Mela. It motivates them. For some people, memorizing sloka motivates them. For some people, seva motivates. They may not like to listen to classes, but if they're doing some seva, they become so inspired. So every individual knows what motivates them. In the Navavida Bhakti, everything is equal. Whatever is motivating you, you make sure that you focus on that and you keep doing it. At the same time, you also know what demotivates you. You know very well that if I'm going to watch the cricket scores, then I get slowly drifted. You know very well that if you're going to read newspaper, it's going to make you demotivated. You know if you're going to call this person on the phone today or associate with this particular Prabhuji, you're going to be demotivated. You know very well. No, you don't need an outside prescription. You know what is demotivating you, then you just be careful. Just be careful from that, right? Sometimes you see, our past attachments or our past habits are like a tiger. When you sedate a tiger, then the tiger is a sleeping tiger. He doesn't disturb us. But if you pinch the tiger, he will wake up and he will again attack us. What does a tiger do? A tiger devours our body. And what does our past attachment or past habits do? They devour our Krishna consciousness. With lot of difficulty, we come up to a particular stage. And then if we again start with our previous bad habits, then they just devour us. See, sometimes what happens, this tiger is in hibernation. It's not termination. Like sometimes you keep your laptop on hibernation, but it's not shut down. The laptop is still on. Similarly, sometimes our past habits, our past attachment are in hibernation. And we start assuming that they're gone. They're gone out of my life. Now I don't get attracted to. It's not true. You may anytime get attracted, so better to stay away, right? For example, I remember once one devotee was asking me that, Mataji, I have to take my family for dinner outside to a hotel. Okay, so he is initiated, but the rest of the family members are not. So he has to go sometime. So now what happens when he goes there? They are eating all what he was eating once upon a time, which he doesn't eat now because he's initiated. So that old smells, because as devotees you don't take onion garlic, but these people are still eating onion garlic. Now what is happening? You are unnecessarily putting yourself in a situation where you are pinching your sedated tiger, And sometimes we are very overconfident because what happens, you go 1 or 2 times and nothing happens. And then you're very confident. I went to the movie, but look, Mataji, nothing happened. I was okay. I just went for my children, Or I went to a hotel, but look, nothing happened. So you're very confident. But it's not always going to be like that. Because sometimes you pinch a tiger 1 time and 2 times, the tiger doesn't. But the 3rd time you pinch, it may wake up. So sometimes your old habits or your old attachments, if you're not careful, then they will just prop up. And then the tiger will come out from his hibernation and devour us. So we have to be so careful. But if we are careful, what is that stimulus which is disturbing our Krishna consciousness? And we are careful in avoiding, then what will happen? Slowly over a period of time, the tiger automatically will go from hibernation to termination. And then you are safe. So at least for that period, you have to be careful not to go back to old habits with overconfidence. I think I'm fine. I'm 15 years, I'm 30 years, I'm 20 years, I think I should be fine. No, better to avoid as much as possible. So, to culminate the lecture, we were talking about how repeating, that means continuously Shravanam Kirtanam, how engaging your mind into Krishna's service, how to keep it engaged, keep repeating, how to keep an aim in life. If you don't have aim, then you aimless, then you become shameless. And then association, what kind of association that you are, giving your mind, So that is also very careful. It's not only minding your mind, but minding what you give your mind is also very important. Whom are you hearing? Like several times I tell this, that don't make yourself like public bins, when you go to a park. In India, we see in the park and all, they have this public dustbins and it's written there, use me. So it's a public dustbin. Anybody wants, they can put trash in that. But we shouldn't make ourselves into public bins. And we shouldn't post here, use me. That means Prabhu, Mataji, anybody who wants to say whatever, I'm just ready to listen to any kind of gossip. I'm ready to listen to whatever you say. No, we are not public bins. We should be very selective on whom do we give our ears to and what are we hearing. It's very important. Another thing is about the stimulus. Very careful, and that which is disturbing us or that which provocates us, we should be far from it. So don't forget to remember Krishna. And the other part is we should remember to forget the anti-devotional activities. That means try to stay away from anti-devotional activities and try to focus your mind on remembering Krishna. I'll say one last thing and culminate the lecture here. Whatever we do from morning to night, if we add Krishna in it, just like you want to make something tasty, we dress it with a pinch of black salt or just put a little, just add. Whatever activities we do, we just add Krishna to it. I mean, that's the beginning stage, of course. The whole point was Krishna is the center of our activities and we do little activities around him. But to begin with, whatever we are doing, we add Krishna into our activities, right? Like Jiva Goswami says, the bhakti is three kinds of bhakti. One is Aropa Siddha Bhakti. One is Sangha Siddha Bhakti, one is Swarupa Siddha Bhakti. Aropa Siddha Bhakti is a very, very beginning stage where whatever you do, you remember Krishna and you make that activity into bhakti. For example, from morning to night, we do lots of activities. Let's say you brush your teeth, you take bath. There's nothing Krishna conscious about brushing your teeth or passing stool, just about anything what you do. But at the same time, as devotees, we want to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So what do we do about it? So Jiva Goswami says, Aropa Siddha Bhakti. Aropa Siddha Bhakti is that, let's say somebody is not a thief. But if you put an allegation that he is a thief, then he becomes a thief, right? Okay, because you put an allegation. So he says, whatever activity you do, you put allegation of bhakti on it, then it becomes a bhakti, right? It's not a very pure form of bhakti. So that means whatever activities you do, just remember Krishna. That means whenever you do that activity, you say, my dear Lord, I'm doing this as an offering to you. Like we have this sloka in Bhagavad Gita, Yat karoshi, yadashnasi, yat juhoshi, dadasi, yat. Whatever I'm doing, thinking, talking, walking, everything, my Lord, I offer it to you. So this is Aropa Siddha Bhakti. Whatever you do, remember Krishna, that you are the phala bhoga. Whatever the result, I give it to you. The second is Sangha. But at least for now, we can start with this. Like whatever we do from morning to night, the moment we get down from our bed till we sleep, whatever activities we do, we remember Krishna and we say, Krishna, this I'm doing it as an offering to you. This is very simple. It's very simple. Anybody can do it, not a big process. And once you do that, you're free from karma. It becomes bhakti, right? So these are some of my thoughts on this sloka today. So when Lord Shiva tells the prachetas that keep it in your mind, and then this thought came in my mind that, yeah, true. Keeping in our mind is a big challenge in Krishna consciousness. And then we spoke about how Krishna says that those who remember him, yogi nam api sarvesam, the best is one who has faith in him, one who worships him. And then Prabhupada talks about Ambarish Maharaj, how he used every limb in Krishna's service and how devotees are silent. They don't talk nothing but only Krishna. And then we spoke about how we have to engage our mind in remembering Krishna. We have to make our life around Krishna. Krishna has to be center of our life. So we remember him in every activity that we do. I think I'll end here and take questions. If anybody has any questions. One last point that I would like to mention, especially because of this whole situation of coronavirus, what we can do as devotees is avoid listening too much of news on coronavirus, because that also disturbs our Krishna consciousness. I remember this very beautiful story, very humorous story actually, Prabhupada had told. He was saying that how there was one saint on the outskirts of a village, and he was a Siddha Purush, he could see past, present, future, and a very, very advanced sadhu. And what he actually sees one fine day is that inside the village there is this plague personified walking in. So the sadhu immediately stops him and says, "Where are you going?" So he says, "I'm going inside this village, I have to kill people, I'm plague personified." And then the sadhu asks him that, how many people are you going to kill? So he just looks at his list and he says, "Well, 1,000 on my list." So then sadhu can't do anything about it because, it's a nature's, Yamaraj has sent. So he said, "Fine, go ahead." And then after a few months, when the plague walks out of the village, the sadhu asks him, "So, mission accomplished, you did your job, how many people you took?" So he says 20,000. So the sadhu immediately asked him that, "Hey, stop. When you went inside, you said you had only 1,000 in your list, and how come you walk out with 20,000? So he says, "Well, I didn't do anything wrong. There were 1,000 in my list and I killed only 1,000. The rest of them died out of fear. It's not my problem. They died out of fear." So I don't know how many will actually die because of coronavirus, but some of them will die out of fear. So as devotees, we should try and avoid not to get too much of information on that, just the right information which is required for us to be safe. And again, having said that, I'm nowhere trying to say that because we are devotees and nothing is going to happen. I'm not trying to make any such statement. Because we are devotees, we have to be all the more careful and be exemplary and follow all the rules given down by the government and stay safe. Because whatever these rules are laid down is for our safety. I remember this one very humorous story of how once this man had a deal with Krishna. He said, "Look, I'm your devotee, and you said in Bhagavad Gita, Name Bhakta Prashati Kaunteya Pratijanihi, I protect my devotees. So are you sure you're going to protect me?" And Krishna says, "100% I'll protect you, nothing to worry, I'll always protect you." So it so happens that in this village there is a floods, and everybody is like vacating the village and trying to run away. And they all, the village heads, they all tell this boy, "Okay, come on, we have to go to the next place because this is flooded." And this boy says, "Well, I think I have a deal with Krishna, so he's going to come and protect me. So I guess you guys can keep going, I'll stay back." And Krishna never came, and there's flood everywhere and he's drowning. And then some people come in the boat, and they see this boy drowning and they say, come on, give your hand, get on the boat." And he says, "Well, I guess you guys can go because I have a deal with Krishna. So he's going to come and protect me, so you can keep going." And they said, "He's crazy." And then they have this helicopters, trying to protect these villagers. And they throw a ladder for this boy and say, "Come on, come up, And then this boy says, "Well, I have a deal with Krishna, so you can keep going because Krishna is going to protect me." And finally, this boy dies. So when he goes up there and he meets Krishna and he's like, "Hello, how are you? You said you were to protect me. What happened to our deal? And you never came to protect me." And Krishna is laughing. He said, "I never break my promise. I came." So he said, "When did you come? I was waiting." So he said, "I came in the form of the village headman, warning you that let's go to the next village. You never came. And I came as a boatman. Come on the boat, and you never came. And I came as the pilot in the helicopter, but you never came." So it's not that, because we are devotees, we are like, "Okay, Krishna is going to protect me, so I don't care about rules and regulations." Because whatever rules and regulations, this is also a message by Krishna for us that stay safe, protect your bodies, because we want to serve in this glorious mission of Srila Prabhupada. We don't know we'll get this chance again or not, We are in the right parampara, in the right place, in the right situation, and we don't want to give up our bodies at this time, such a golden opportunity to preach, such a golden opportunity to practice in our life and go back. So we shouldn't take it very lightly, and we should stay safe and stay protected. It's fine. So sorry for making the class very long. If there are any questions, I think I'm over time. If there are any questions, anybody has any questions? Do we have any questions from the FB page?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji, for a wonderful class. I really like the practical application points you shared, and also I like the stories you shared. That drives the point home for me. I know you shared so many things around mind, but I still ask a focused question for myself. I noticed that it is struggle to chant attentively. So something connected from your class talking about how where we are absorbed the rest of the day. Obviously that affects that also. But other thing you mentioned was about how we usually think about the past and present. You did give some tips around how to not go there by having a goal and like that, by engaging like that. I wanted to hear if you have any other suggestions around how to improve attention in chanting, specifically without thinking about what happened in the past and what I need to do in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. To further speak on this topic, what I want to add is that as Krishna says, Sitoshna Sukha Dukha, there will be always some ups and downs, and we shouldn't get stuck to that. We have to become choiceless in Krishna consciousness. I don't know if I've told about this in this forum before, but when the summer comes, you enjoy the summer. Oh, it's nice. When the winter comes, you enjoy the winter. The summer will go and the winter will go. Everything will pass. Everything is a passing phase. I remember this English poem, I don't know what you call it, says, by a rule, the man is a fool. When it is hot, he wants it cool. When it is cool, he wants it hot. Always wanting that which is not. I think that's our nature. We always want something that which we don't have. So I guess that's where our mind keeps going, always planning, or this I have, this I don't have, and this I want to acquire. So we just need to take things as they are. I remember in my childhood, when we were in school, whenever the teacher was absent, a substitution teacher walks in the classroom, and she always says that do whatever you want, but don't make much noise, because otherwise the principal will come. And what we used to do as children is we used to play Antakshari. I don't know if they know what is Antakshari now, but because now with this tabs and technology, but that time that was our only entertainment. So you sing a song, and then at the end of the song, whatever letter comes, with that letter the other group has to sing a song, and the game goes this way. Now let me tell you, sometimes certain words which end the song are so difficult, you can't even remember a song with that letter. But the game is made in such a way. So if you get P, then you sing with P. If you get K, you sing with K. That's about it. So nobody sits and cries, oh, why did I get K? I wanted R, no, you just enjoy. That's it. Whatever comes, I guess that's how our life also is. When this situation comes, you just be happy in that. And then situation will change. So when that situation comes, you sing with P, and when this situation comes, you sing with K. That's about it. If we can implement this one thing in our life, we can be so happy. This is a present situation, so I try to make the best out of it, without much. See, the problem is that we have so many choices. Sometimes because of so many choices, we are in mess. See, I remember when we were young, in our car, there was radio. So radio means there's no choice, there's no DJ and RJs where you can make a choice, I want to hear this song. Whatever comes in the radio, you have to hear. And life was so beautiful, I'll tell you. Because your parents are there and something is going on the radio, you going from here to a party or a park or a museum, and you enjoy the songs and you're done with it. But nowadays you see, the moment the children and the parents are in the car, the whole problem starts. The children will say, put something modern. The mother will say, no, put some bhajan. The father will say, no, I want to hear rock. And they're already fighting so much over which DVD will go inside. And by the time the destination already arrives and they haven't heard anything. Because so much choices and they have so many, I want this, I want this, I want that. But those days, because there was no choice, whatever came in the radio, we were happy to hear. Even if a bhajan comes, it's okay. Even if some other songs come, because there is no choice. If we can become choiceless in our life, choiceless in the sense, whatever situation comes, take it as if this is Krishna's arrangement. And Krishna is my well-wisher. Krishna loves me. That means this is the best thing for me, what he's doing. And just enjoy it, right? So, I mean, of course, I can go on and on, but this is one thing I want to say is that why are we constantly thinking, or why is our mind in constant fear? What is actually fear? The definition of fear is the difference between our plan and Krishna's plan. Krishna has a plan and we have our plan. When our plan doesn't work and Krishna's plan works, then we start getting, agitated, up and down. Why did this happen? Right? I was telling other day this, that when something happens according to your plan, you should be happy. If something doesn't happen according to your plan, you should be very happy. Because it has not happened according to your plan, that means it is happening according to Krishna's plan. Because then there is no third thing in this. Either things are happening because you want them to, because Krishna has given us a certain independence, or the things are happening because of Krishna's plan. There is nothing in between, right? That means when things are not happening according to us, we should remember that's happening according to Krishna's plan. Krishna is more smarter than us. He's our well-wisher and he's always thinking nice for us. So these are certain ways to counsel our mind, constantly, and try to be in present, be choiceless, take things as they come, accept them, and try to be happy in every situation. Try to be happy in every situation. And that comes only when we have lots of faith on Krishna being our well-wisher. I don't know if this helps your question.
Yeah, it definitely helps, Mati. Thank you so much, Mati.
Yes, Mataji.
Thank you so much for the wonderful class, Mataji. I have a question related to the current situation. So recently, sometimes even devotees are also dying in this because of this coronavirus. And so the situation, like how the people who died in this situation, so their body is disposed like just without any support. So all these things when we see, so how we can understand. So this constantly disturbs the mind, like why it is happening to devotees, because devotees, they engage their body in Krishna conscious activity and it is getting destroyed like something like normal people. Then what is the difference? So how we can understand this?
Alright, so if I understand your question properly, you are saying that devotees are also dying because of coronavirus. So they're also dying like normal people. Normal people are also dying and they're also dying. So what is the difference? They are in Krishna consciousness. So even though they may be externally looking like they're just dying like normal people, but definitely Krishna has his own plan and definitely Krishna is protecting them. Many a times I've told in my classes, our definition of protection is so shallow, I will say. For us, protection means protecting physical body. For us, protection means protection from disease. For us, protection means protecting my family. For us, protection means protecting my finances. Krishna's protection is so wide. It's not only your this life. He has so many plans for you. So if you even see a devotee leaving his body, definitely Krishna is protecting him. He may not have protected his physical body, but Krishna has his own plan. See, even if you see in the Mahabharata, Krishna never protected the sons of Draupadi. All her 5 sons died. Krishna never even protected his own brothers. All the sons of Devaki died. But then Krishna protected Kunti's sons. All the 5 of them were saved. So Krishna has his own definition. He has his own definition of protection. So even if externally we see that devotees are dying, or we may have a question, how come they were not protected? But Krishna's definition of protection is very wide. He's protecting their soul, right? I've spoken about this many a times, that how we see in the life of Maharaj Chitraketu also. He was a devotee, but he got cursed by Parvati Devi and he was born as Vritsasur. We see in the life of Indradyumna Maharaj also. He was not doing anything wrong. He was simply meditating. And Agastya Muni comes there and asks for water, and Indradyumna Maharaj is like in meditation. He didn't hear, and Agastya Muni gets upset and he curses him and he becomes Gajendra, becomes an elephant. So we see in the case of Maharaj Bharat, he left his house, everything, and he was in the forest. And just because he protected a deer, he had to become a deer in the next life. So sometimes we may question as devotees, oh my God, what is that? Krishna did not protect Bharat Maharaj. From a human form, he got a deer body. Indradyumna Maharaj, from a human form, he got an elephant body. We see Chitraketu Maharaj, he became a demon. So is Krishna protecting? So Jiva Goswami gives a very beautiful answer to this, and he says definitely Krishna is protecting, but his definition of protection is different, because when Chitraketu was born as Vritsasur, his consciousness was so high. That's why we talk about Vritsasur, we glorify Vritsasur in Srimad Bhagavatam, because he was, even by leaving his body, he was constantly remembering the Lord. So he was more glorious than what he was in Chitraketu's body. We see even in Maharaj Indradyumna's life, he was more glorious when he came as Gajendra. Lord himself came to protect Gajendra, though he was in an animal body. We see in Maharaj Bharat's life, though he was born as a deer, in the life body of a deer, his consciousness was very high. He was completely remembering the Lord. If you read that 5th canto, you will see that he used to eat only dry leaves, and he was doing so much austerity, and he was constantly remembering Krishna. So though they got so-called inferior bodies, but their consciousness was very superior. So sometimes our definition of protection is so small. We just want to see externally everything is fine. Oh, Krishna is protecting. But it's not like that. What Krishna is trying to do is he's trying to protect your soul. So sometimes we may think, okay, there's devotees, they left their body, now what will happen? Nothing to worry, Krishna is protecting their soul. Who knows, maybe Krishna is awaiting them, Krishna up there, or maybe Krishna is giving them a higher birth, or maybe Krishna is sending them to some other planets for preaching. Maybe, oh, Krishna has his own plan. Oh, he has so many other plans. Maybe their service was more wanted in some other place, right? So we never know. So Krishna has his own plan, so we don't have to worry, because I think it is Garuda Puran or where is there where Krishna says that when my devotee has worshipped me or served me whole life, then at the end of the life I come and tell my name in their ears. Even if they forget to remember me, I remind them. I think it's Garuda Puran, or this is in context with how Ramanujacharya asked this question to Kanchipurna, because Kanchipurna had a very good relationship with the deities, Varadaraj. So Ramanujacharya asked Kanchipuram that go and ask this question to Varadaraj. So Kanchipurna, he asked Varadaraj that what will happen to those devotees who have served you whole life, but let's say at the end of the life, their death is in such a tragic way that they are not able to remember you, then what will happen? Like sometimes we see even in our sannyasis in our ISKCON movement, we have seen a couple of them, they died in a car accident or sometime in such a bad situation. So what will happen to those devotees who died in such a situation that they didn't even have the opportunity to remember Krishna at that end moment? What will happen to them? So then Varadaraj gives answer to this. He tells Kanchipurna, he said, for those devotees who have worshipped me for the whole life, I will come at the end of their life and I will tell them my name in their ears. I will remind them. So we may be externally seeing that they died with this virus or this particular situation, but Krishna never forgets. Whatever neha vikrama nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpa apyasya punyasya trayate mahato bhaya. Swalpa, whatever little bit somebody has done in Krishna consciousness, Krishna doesn't forget. He's not ungrateful. So even externally we see, don't know what way the last rites happened or what situation they were put in. But definitely Krishna is protecting their soul. Definitely Krishna will see that they are put in a proper position. He'll take care of them. So it's just that our definition of protection is very, very small. So I can go on, but I want to take some other questions. Did this help you, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes.
I have a question.
Prabhuji, I'm unable to hear your question. Can you be a little loud? Or somebody needs to mute the other people.
My question is that in Ramayana, Mother Kaikeyi, likewise, Mother Kaikeyi, not Mother Kaikeyi, Mantra has polluted her mind by Mother Kaikeyi. So in that case, and because of Mother Kaikeyi, Ram banished, Mother Kaikeyi banished Lord Shri Ram. But in our situation also, if something like Mother Kaikeyi, something, if in our life also someone told us to go from here, you get lost, and you don't come after 14 years or 15 years. How to deal with? Should we rebel in such situation, or should we go from it as a mercy and blessing situation?
Oh my God. I don't know how I will answer this question because it's so subjective. I don't know what is the situation. If somebody banishes you, how do you accept it or you don't accept it? Now, it all depends upon what is your situation, what is the importance of that person in your life. There's so many factors. I don't know how I can make a general statement on that. Because see, having said that, in case of Lord Ram, it's different. It's all Leela, and he has certain other purposes because he has to go there, he has to kill Ravan, he has to kill so many demons. So it was all pre-planned. But in our life, when such situation comes, what should we do in such situation? It depends upon, I don't know, I mean, maybe you can personally ask me this question separately, giving me a little bit more details on what exactly is your situation and what you're talking about, because I find it very difficult to answer imagining somebody ask you to leave a particular place, whether you should leave it or not. I don't know what kind of situation you are in, and if you change your location, will you still be able to be in touch with devotees or not? What kind of situation you are put in. It is a little difficult for me to answer. If you want me to answer like generally, if there is somebody creating a problem, do we repel or not? I can answer to that question. As devotees, we are intelligent. It's like, just like I told in my class, that we don't do it like Gandhiji, that you slap me here, now you can slap me here also. You don't do that, because we are intelligent. We know what we have to do. At the same time, we are careful how much of it, because we don't want to see again who is on the opposite side. Are we offending Vaishnav? What is the situation? Is it for our benefit that the person is? There's so many things. It's very subjective. I'm unable to answer. But as devotees, we can definitely repel back and protect ourselves from, from people who are causing trouble. It's like that example of example of that snake, Narad Muni's disciple. Narad Muni tells the snake that you have become a devotee now, so you should not bite anybody. And then after 6 months, when Narad Muni comes, he sees that everybody has beaten the snake so badly, he has all scars over his body, and he says, how come you became like this? And the snake says, it's because of you. You told me not to repel back, not to beat anybody, so now people are hitting me with stones. And then Narad Muni tells the snake, I told you not to beat or not to bite anybody, but definitely you can make a noise, you can hiss, so that people don't beat you or something. So as devotees, definitely we don't want to offend anybody. At the same time, we have to be careful in what context, who is giving us trouble or what is happening, and appropriately respond. We can at least hiss. The whole point is internally we don't get affected by anything is the whole point. Right? Externally we do need to sometimes be grave, sometimes show anger, sometimes depending on the situation. But internally we are detached. It's not affecting us so much. I don't know, I'm sorry, maybe I could not answer your question, Prabhu.
At the same time, many times, if a person offends you for no reason, and
now again the question is, who is that person who is offending? Who is that person in question? Is he a senior devotee? Is he your guru? Is he your relative? Is he your family member? What kind? Because with everybody you have different kind of dealings. If somebody is senior to us, then we take their we take their chastisement as a blessings. If somebody is doing that who are junior to us, then we take it as a child's mistake and we forgive out of love and affection. If somebody who is equal to us do that, then we take it as a as somebody who is helping us to cut down our ego, or we take it as our past life karma, or that we must have hurt him some way. He's just being instrumental. And again, it depends upon what the situation is. And if it's only about hurting our little ego here and there, then we shouldn't mind it so much, because at least there is somebody who keeps cutting our ego, you know. One way it's good, then we will never be egoistic, you know. So like many times I told this example that Jiva Goswami once said that everybody in this world are good. So he said that all these good people in this world are forced to behave badly with me because of my bad karma. Sometimes our karma is so bad that even sometimes some nice people also behave with us only badly, because maybe we have been instrument or we have done something bad to them in previous life. And frankly speaking, whatever happens in our life is because of our karma only, you know. My life, my karma, whatever you do. But again, if you want me to go into details, everything that happens in our life again has three causes. One is the immediate cause, that person who is offending you. One is the real cause, your past karma. One is the ultimate cause, which is Krishna's sanction. So everything happens because of these three causes. So you have to analyze and how to take it. So again, it all depends upon what context. If there's small little things like somebody say, I don't know what is your context of offense, because I get so many kinds of questions. Sometimes somebody asks me about offense. I went hard to explain for 1 hour, and then I came to know that for him what was offense is that on the Sunday feast line or queue, people pushed him or didn't give him respect, though he was senior, or maybe didn't serve him prasadam, or it was so little, just that his ego got hurt because he was a donor, or maybe he was not given proper rest, something like that. So I really don't know in what context the offense. Is it like big offense, you know, or what kind, or is it demotivating you in your spiritual life? It's so subjective. So unless until I really know what it is, I don't know how to answer it. Do you have any questions in FB? Please tell me.
I just got.
Sorry for interrupting. I have a doubt now. The material.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes,
Thank you,
Mataji.
Mataji, for this wonderful class.
Thank you.
Yes, Mataji, now this is a question related to, again, when I was explaining it to the kids in the kids class. Like we say that Krishna helps, we have a saying, right? When you help yourself, Krishna will also help you. Or when you surrender, Krishna will help you. And we have an example of Draupadi, how Krishna ran to help her. But in that explanation, I'm stuck up at a point wherein we know that we have to do our endeavor and then Krishna will help. But at the same time, in the Draupadi story, it is that she was holding on to her sari, and when she left out her hands in, only then Krishna helped her. So when I'm explaining, I'm having a problem with the kids understanding that how much are you going to endeavor and at what point are you going to leave it to Krishna? Because when I say that you have to trust Krishna, the story also, right? Krishna is having food, and a person is in the forest and the animals are coming to eat him. And then the man picks up the stick to defend himself. Krishna says, okay, he's taking care of himself, I need not go. So I'm stuck up at that point. Till what point are we going to show our endeavor, and at what point are we going to leave and surrender to Krishna that he's going to help us in that situation? Could you please help Mataji?
Yeah, wonderful. It's a very beautiful question, and definitely it's a challenge when we explain to the children, because definitely this is what we try to tell our children also, that you also have to make your endeavor. Like even in my story that I told today is how Krishna actually came to help, but he didn't take it because he thought Krishna will directly come, but Krishna comes via so many people. So when we are explaining to the children, definitely even it's a challenge where if we tell them completely depend on Krishna, then they'll start becoming lazy and they say we don't have to do anything, Krishna will help. Maybe we shouldn't study for our exams. And at the same time, so what I feel is maybe basically at the children level, we have to tell them that they need to work hard, because the parents and the teachers are all the way of Krishna to help us. So whatever they are saying, we follow because they are also representatives of Krishna. So when we listen to the parents or depend on teachers and parents for their guidance, it is also coming through Krishna only. Krishna is making them a medium, is what you can say. Because when we talk to children about these Draupadi examples, it will be so difficult for them to understand what are they supposed to, so this is how you can say that Krishna is helping us through these different mediums. So we have to make our endeavor. This is by Krishna's help only. At the same time, see, we make our endeavor, but result we leave it on Krishna. So result we leave it on Krishna, and this is what is coming on my mind immediately when you talk about this, is because basically even for us in a devotee's life, we are also not preaching that we shouldn't do anything and completely depend on Krishna. What we are trying to basically say is that what result Krishna will give, that is his choice, but we have to make our 100% endeavor, and when that result comes, then we are confident that that is what we deserve. Did you get my point? When the result comes of our endeavor, then we have complete faith on Krishna that is the result which I deserve. So that is where we are 100% surrendered to Krishna. So we are not 100% surrendered to Krishna when we are making an endeavor. Endeavor we will make 100%. We'll do our best. But when the result comes, at that time we are 100% surrendered to Krishna with a firm belief that this is what I deserve. So this is what maybe we can explain the children also in that way, that we make our 100% efforts, but then whatever result that Krishna gives, at that time we have to be completely dependent or surrendered to Krishna, because he is our well-wisher, and whatever result he gives is for our good. But endeavor we need to make, because Krishna gave us this body and intelligence. So we can always say that just like Draupadi prayed, we can pray to Krishna to give us intelligence to protect ourselves. And when Krishna actually gives us the result of our endeavor, then we surrender just like Draupadi surrendered, that whatever you do is for my good. So we can put the surrender here in this way, that Draupadi was completely surrendered to the result what Krishna is going, because she did her prayers. She prayed to Krishna. She asked, Dwarkadish, please come and protect me. She didn't slack in praying. She put her 100% endeavor in praying. She put her 100% endeavor. She tried to go to Bhishma and Drona and Dhritarashtra and to all her husbands. She did all her best. But at last, after the prayer was over, she left the result to Krishna. Then she left her sari, that now I'm done. I did all my endeavors and now it's up to you. Whatever result you give, I'm ready to accept it. So I guess in our devotional life or kids, student life, this is what they need to do. Put their 100% endeavor. But when it comes to the result, then they are ready to accept. That is where the surrender point comes. That we are ready to accept whatever you give, whatever your conclusion, whatever you think we deserve, we are okay to accept that result. Is what coming to my mind immediately from the top of the mind. And if you want me to give a better analysis, I'll think over it and get back to you. But did this answer help you anyway, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji. Perfect. You're so sweet.
Thank you
so much,
Thank
Mataji.
you.
Thank you. Your classes and your short clips always come to your rescue. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Anybody else has any other question?
Mataji, just to extend the question of the previous question. So, how we can understand, like, okay, sometimes we are endeavoring, and if the result is not as we expected, so then if we again, okay, the results are okay, we have to surrender to Krishna. So whatever the results that it comes, so how we can understand, okay, this is the result given by Krishna, or the endeavor is from my side is not enough. So I have to do more endeavor. So how, where, at what point we can understand, okay, we are doing over endeavoring, or it's only the endeavor. So how we can differentiate that?
So what I understand is, your question is that how do we understand that the result which I got is because of Krishna, or is it because of my not able to do the work properly? Suppose if you're not satisfied with your result, so do I take it as Krishna's mercy, or do I think that I'm supposed to work harder next time? Well, I think it's both ways. You do an introspection, where did you go wrong and what could you have do better? or what could you have changed in your the way you did your things that would have produced better result. But at the same time, whatever result comes, we accept it as Krishna's plan, that this is the endeavor I made, and for this endeavor, Krishna has given me whatever I deserve, the best. The next time, I'll make a better endeavor, and Krishna will appropriately again reward me or punish me or whatever. Appropriately, he will give me the fruits. So as devotees, we never get demotivated. We always want to improve ourselves. We don't sit like, okay, that is what Krishna wanted. See, all this Krishna thing comes in picture only with the result, right? So endeavor, we can always improve. So as devotees, we can always have self-introspection, see where we went wrong. We have to be smart also. We can't be like, okay, Krishna wanted like that. No, we are very active, we are hardworking, we are smart, but we are not attached to the result. In the sense, we accept the results. So when Krishna gives this particular result, and suppose according to you that result is not what you wanted something better, you can again try, nothing. And sometimes if you are confused about this, because these are so subjective things, depending upon what situation, what particular endeavor were you making, was that endeavor in your material life, or is it some endeavor which you're talking about in your devotional service? Because if you say it is about your devotional service, then I'll say, we always keep trying to do better and better and better every time. In devotional life, I will say, no, we don't accept. We want to do much better. If it's your material life that you're talking about, I don't know. It's completely subjective. Sometimes you can also take help of senior Vaishnavas or some other buddy devotees who are with you. You can just discuss the situation with them, what you think. Or you can take their help in deciding what endeavor is more endeavor. But from your side, introspection is again endeavor in what you have not clarified, whether the endeavor in your devotional life you're talking about or in your material life. If it's an endeavor in your material life, then make sure that when will it become an over endeavor? When you are doing it at the risk of decreasing your devotional life or sadhana. Suppose if this particular material endeavor that which you are making is making you do less of your sadhana, or you're going down in your sadhana, going down in your vanchan, hearing, going down in your temple visits, going down in your devotional service, that means it's becoming too much of endeavor. Because for us, we need to balance between the material life and spiritual life. So if this particular endeavor is disturbing your spiritual life, then it's becoming a little too much endeavor. If you're talking this in context of spiritual life or devotional service, then yes, you must make 100% endeavor. You should try again to improve. Lots of introspection you have to do. And also, one thing that I would like to mention here is that whether it is spiritual or material, one should again not make so much endeavor that it makes you uncomfortable. Or because you see in the 9th chapter Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "So sukham kartum avyayam." This process is joyous process. So sometimes you should not make your devotional life also so cumbersome, is the right word, is so much hectic that after some time it becomes a burden. You have to balance it properly. If that was your question about endeavor in spiritual life, then because I remember in my personal life also, sometimes I do too much of so many things at a time that I don't take care of my health, and then and then I need to take a bigger break to recapture, So then I do also get scoldings from my Siksha Guru, my husband, and he'll tell, stop and take a break and eat on time and do something. So again, you see, so there should be somebody in your life who tells you where you're going a little over endeavor, or you're going, So I didn't understand your question whether it was in material life or spiritual life. If it is spiritual life, go ahead, try your best, do more, take advice from senior devotees, always do introspection and try to improve better. If it's your material life that you are asking me whether I should make over endeavor or not, then make sure that it's not disturbing your spiritual life, it's not disturbing your sadhana, it's not disturbing your health, then it's all right. Otherwise, if it's disturbing you mentally, you're not able to chant properly because of that, you are upset, you are unhappy, then don't make it so extra endeavor. I don't know if this helped.
Yes, Mataji, definitely. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dhanab Pranama Srila Prabhupada and Gurumara. Mataji, you were telling the controlling the mind. I was just thinking,
Sometimes so many Facebook messages or WhatsApp messages, we just become so much observed, and then so many important things to do in the regarding devotional service. We forget, our minds is so badly. But how to give importance means more importance to our main work, and then not cheated by this media.
So what I understand your question is that sometimes so many messages are coming over the Facebook, on WhatsApp, and we are so much, full of all these messages that sometimes it disturbs our sadhana. So what do we do and how do we manage? I think one practical tip that I can give from my life is keep some timings, because if our mobile data and Wi-Fi is always on, and if the messages keep coming, and then you see one message and then you keep seeing other message, and then it becomes a mess, maybe we can just keep one particular time wherein we log into our Facebook and WhatsApp, and that's about it. So maybe, like, I don't know, again, depends upon how much frequently one needs to see, depends upon what kind of job that you are doing. If it requires you to be logged in all the time, I don't know. But if they're only simple housewives, then I'm sure they can manage. Or even if they're into their workspace, I'm sure they can always have some kind of a time. Maybe this time in the morning I'll see for an hour, or afternoon or night, and before and after I'm not going to, unless and until you are in office and it's official. We can do something like that. That's what comes to my mind practically. Just keep it off, We can't switch off our cell phones because we need them for communication, but we can switch off. We can make a, I'm not going to open my WhatsApp window, or I'm not going to open my Facebook only on this particular time, or only from this time to this time I'm going to do. Because as ISKCON devotees, we are all doing so much multitasking, so many things that we are doing, that we need to draw a line somewhere. Otherwise, we will be, drowned, because, especially now because of this corona, thousands of messages are coming all the time. So maybe we can be very selective. Instead of keep going on watching every 10-15 minutes, half an hour, the updates, maybe we can keep a time in a day. Every day at 8 o'clock in the evening, I'm going to see the corona updates, and that's about it, or something like that. That's what is coming into my mind right now. That's the only thing you can do. Like I said, we need to saturate ourselves with so much Krishna consciousness that we don't have time for Maya. So this lockdown period, we can keep ourselves so busy whole day that we just give specific fixed time for news updates. I don't know if it helps you, Mataji. I'm not able to think of immediately any other answer. Thank you.
No, it's so nice, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. It's all the answers also good. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you for the beautiful class, Mataji. Mataji, related to the previous questions on the social media, Mataji, like I homeschool my son, so it is better for me to stay off Facebook or WhatsApp. But for him, I have to be on Facebook, because a lot of homeschooling groups are there on Facebook. And while doing so, and even while listening to some lecture or something on Facebook, I kind of, mismanage my time with my son's schooling. So in my material life, whether doing the spiritual thing, sometimes I mess up, or the timing goes away with my son's schooling, and then end of the day, I'm anyway not happy. I know I have done something spiritual for my Krishna conscious advancement, but somewhere I don't feel fulfilled, Mataji. Could you please help?
No, I couldn't understand. Your question is that you homeschool your child, and while you are doing that, sometimes you start hearing some spiritual lecture, and you get so immersed into it that his schedule goes hayway. Your son's schedule goes hayway. Was that your question?
Yes, Mataji.
Right. So I guess all the devotees face this problem, and we just need to, just like my previous answer, that you need to make some time. So let's say, like, you decided to teach him every day for 2 hours, so that 2 hours you don't touch your phone, or you just be strict with yourself that I'm not going to listen to any lectures for this 2 hours, and I'm going to completely dedicate to my son, whatever 1 hour, 2 hour, whatever you have planned in a day. And you be strict about it, since you have taken up such a big responsibility of homeschooling. you'll have to do it sincerely. Maybe you need to keep your phone off, or you just prepare what are you going to teach him, and beforehand you keep the videos downloaded, whatever you want to show him related to his subjects. I think that's what I understood, that sometimes you are trying to show him something related to the subject and then you go off to some spiritual this. So sometimes maybe you just
No,
is it
not like his all subjects are not spiritual. I do Srimad Bhagavatam and others Krishna related subjects with him, but not like his science, his math. Not everything is Krishna related directly, so as to say. And those things, I think, okay, this is not as priority as me watching a video or hearing a lecture. Sometimes it is not every day, but often I find myself between his non-Krishna conscious subjects and my watching or hearing his Krishna conscious video.
all right? So you are saying that his subjects are not Krishna conscious, so sometimes you feel it's not so important because physics, science, maths. Mataji, let me tell you one thing. Practically, from my elder son, he's grown up, so he's doing law. I don't teach him anymore. But my younger son, sometimes I do teach him when he doesn't understand something to do with his physics and chemistry or biology. But what I try to do, my practical example is, even in his physics and biology, I try to mix up some Krishna conscious examples, and he finds it very funny, and actually he enjoys it, because when I mix it up like that, he remembers it more nicely. Immediately, I'm not able to give you example, but I remember something to do with. I think other day I was explaining him about the atomic structure, and something to do with those nucleus and all, and I just try to give some Krishna conscious example, something to do with our temple. Okay, nucleus means the altar of our temple, from where all the strength, I just try to mix it up in that way, and he finds it very funny, and I find it very interesting, because even though I'm explaining physics and chemistry, I'm always trying to bring some Krishna consciousness into it, and he really enjoys. And because of that, he says that I never forget that subject, because even if I'm writing the exam, I remember the example mummy gave with this related to the temple, related to scripture, related to some story. So of course it may not be easy always to come up with that story, but I'm sure you once start doing it, it will come naturally. Some example will come up, and you can always mix it up. Are you able to understand what I'm trying to say? Like even the other day I was explaining him the parts of a flower, petal, sepal. So there also I try to, give some Krishna conscious example and mix it up in such a way that he really enjoys it. So it's good for me also. I have fun, and he also remembers it because the way it has been told. So this is one simple tip from my side. I don't know how much you can apply it, but you can do it that way. And even if we like it or we don't like it, we have to teach physics, chemistry, maths, whatever are there, because all our children are Vaikuntha children. They are born to devotee parents, and they're going to all become big preachers of Krishna consciousness in the future. So if we don't teach them rightly, how we are preparing the future preachers of ISKCON movement. So we definitely need to invest some time into them, and see that they get their subjects right, see that they get the degrees right, so that when they go out in the world there and preach, people will listen to their preachings, and they'll be able to preach nicely. Again, at the same time, of course, somebody may question me that there are ways to teach all these subjects via Srimad Bhagavatam, but I don't know. These are not my expertise, because my younger son goes to a normal school, and I cannot homeschool him because of the other responsibilities that I have in the temple. So he has to go to a normal school. But as far as possible, I try to give him Krishna consciousness, but I cannot exclusively give him no Jada Vidya and only spiritual knowledge. Is not possible in my situation. There are devotees out there who are doing it. We have this example of this very famous Mataji who did the whole teaching of his children via Srimad Bhagavatam only. So there are some people who are really expert in that, who can do it. But if we are not, then at least we can have a combination and try to give them quality time, try to stick to these subjects when we are teaching. So it's like when you are studying, you are studying. When you are hearing, you are hearing. When we are doing spiritual thing, we are doing spiritual thing. We don't mix up things. And we have to do it sincerely. I hope this helps, Mataji.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you so much for explaining. Thank you.
So it's already 6:45. Are there any more questions, or we can close this session?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam Mataji.
Yes, Mataji.
Hi, Krishna. Oh, this is someone else.
Mataji, thank you so much for your class. చాలా బాగా చెప్పారు మాతాజీ. బట్ నేను నాకు ఏమనిపిస్తుంది, అంటే చాలా సేపు నుంచి మాట్లాడుతారు మాతాజీ. ఇట్స్ రియల్లీ గ్రేట్ మీ సహనము అంతా. కృష్ణ ప్రొటెక్ట్ యూ ఆల్వేస్.
Thank you.
Strength, Mataji.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your wishes and your prayers.
Thanks, Mataji. No questions, Mataji, but I just want to.
Thank you so much. I appreciate. I was actually not doing well last 1 month. I've been down with cough and cold, and also thank you so much for this prayers at this time.
నరసింహ స్వామి మిమ్మల్ని బాగా ప్రొటెక్ట్ చేయాలి.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
హరే కృష్ణ.
Yes. So, is there anybody else? So, are there any more questions from FB?
सब कृष्णा 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 लगे, सब कृष्ण